What would you do if one ordinary night turned into a moment that changed your life forever? Picture this. A millionaire CEO, weighed down by grief and loneliness, leaves behind the glitter of a charity gala. He wanders into the rain-soaked alleys of Seattle, only to discover a little girl curled up in a cardboard box, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. In that instant, his world shifts. It is not just about wealth or power anymore. It is about a choice to see, to stay, and to care. This is not simply a story about success or sorrow. It is about rediscovering the meaning of family, of love, and of second chances when you least expect them. Stay with us as we unfold this moving journey. And remember to subscribe to the Retold stories, because sometimes the most powerful tales are the ones that remind us to be human. The evening was supposed to be perfect, a shimmering tribute to legacy and remembrance. The Mitchell Foundation Gala was filled with glittering gowns, champagne glasses clinking, and a towering portrait of Claire and Ella that loomed over the ballroom. But for Graham Mitchell, none of it mattered. He had been going through the motions for 3 years, ever since the accident that had torn his world apart. Tonight, however, something inside him snapped.
I need to think
Standing
this
at
through
the
carefully.
edge of the valet circle, he felt suffocated by the camera flashes and polite laughter. His name was plastered everywhere, but it felt like a mask he could no longer wear. Without a word, he turned away. The night air was damp, heavy with drizzle, and he climbed into his sleek Jaguar with no destination in mind. He thought maybe a drive would help him breathe, but the farther he went, the more the polished streets gave way to cracked asphalt and shadowed alleys. He crossed bridges, bypassed neighborhoods he used to know, and ended up in the forgotten corners of downtown Seattle. The market stalls were quiet now, neon signs buzzing faintly, their glows scattered across rain puddles. He drove without caring what his assistant Alicia would think, or how appalled his board might be if they knew. None of it mattered anymore. Eventually, he parked near Pike Place Market, a place he had not visited in years. Pulling his coat tighter, he wandered on foot, the mist clinging to his hair and the city sounds growing harsher the deeper he went. Trash cans rattled, sirens moaned in the distance, and voices argued behind closed doors. The underbelly of the city pulsed around him, raw and unfiltered. At the end of a narrow passage, a garbage fire flickered, casting orange shadows on brick walls. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets, muttering to himself, unsure what had driven him here. He felt like a man searching for something real, something that hurt enough to remind him he was still alive. Then he heard a faint rustle. His step slowed, instinct sharp. Past a stack of wooden pallets, and beside a dented dumpster, a cardboard box sagged from the drizzle. Inside, curled up like a small animal hiding from the world, was a little girl. She could not have been more than 6, barefoot, her toes raw from the cold. An oversized hoodie swallowed her frame, and in her arms she clutched a worn teddy bear missing an eye. She was so still that for a moment, Graham wondered if she was asleep, or worse. As he crouched, the girl spoke before he could. Her eyes remained closed, her voice calm and strangely steady. "You're not the first man who looked sad and walked by," she murmured. "But I guess you talk nicer than most." The words struck him harder than he expected. They carried no bitterness, no fear, just weariness, far too old for someone so young. Something about her voice, her composure, hit him like a ghost of Ella, his daughter. The resemblance in spirit was haunting.
You have been
His chest tightened,
a wonderful
his breath
presence in my
shallow.
life.
Slowly, he knelt, careful not to frighten her. "It's cold out here," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." She
looks lonely.
didn't open her eyes, but he noticed her fingers
looks
twitch
lonely.
around the teddy bear, a small flinch betraying how alert she really was. "Most people pretend I don't exist," she replied, her tone flat. "They're good at that part." "I'm not pretending," he said quietly. One of her eyes cracked open then, sharp and wary. She studied him like she was the one in control, deciding if he was worth her attention. "You smell like hotel soap," she whispered. "That means you don't live down here. So why are you here?" Graham hesitated. He had no answer, no reason that made sense even to himself. "I don't know,"
Here.
he admitted. She turned her head away, tugging the hoodie tighter. A gust of wind rattled the alley, and he felt his own insignificance pressing down on him. Still, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a scarf he had barely worn all winter. Holding it out, he asked gently, "Can I give you something warm?" The girl was cautious, but deliberate. Slowly, she reached out, grabbed the scarf, and pulled it close, without another word. She wrapped it around herself as if it were a blanket, curling deeper into her box. Graham watched, torn between questions and silence. He wanted to ask about her parents, where she stayed, how she survived, but he knew words could be dangerous. Then, her voice came again. Softer, this time.
Isabelle.
"If you're not going to take me, just let me sleep. This box is mine." His breath caught. The way she claimed ownership of that fragile, damp space shattered him. He thought of Ella's empty bed, of Claire's last voicemail he still couldn't bring himself to play. This little girl, clinging to a teddy bear and a cardboard shelter, had just echoed the loneliness that had haunted him for years. That night, Graham returned to his penthouse, a place that should have felt safe, but instead echoed with emptiness. The modern glass walls and carefully curated decor only made the silence louder. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw hers one cracked open, watching him in the dark. Her words replayed endlessly. "You just talk nicer than most." By dawn, he gave up trying to rest. His chest ached in a way he hadn't felt since the funeral. He wandered his home in restless silence, poured coffee he didn't drink, and stared out at the skyline without seeing it. Finally, he called Alicia, his assistant. His voice was low, unsettled, as he asked her to discreetly check if any reports of homeless or missing children had surfaced near Pike Place. She was surprised, curious, but promised to look. When he hung up, he knew he couldn't wait. He grabbed his coat, headed out, and drove back to the same alley. The same dumpster, the same flickering light, the same cardboard box, and there she was. This time, her eyes were open, and she was already watching him before he even spoke. "You came back," she said simply, hugging her bear tighter. Something shifted inside Graham at that moment. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of belonging, not in the polished halls of wealth, but in the fragile presence of a little girl in a box. When Graham returned to the alley at dawn, the girl was awake. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, her arms wrapped tightly around the bear that seemed to be her entire world. She studied him with eyes too sharp for her age, as though she could see straight through him. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, lips pressing together before whispering, "Maddie, that's a good name," he said with a faint smile. "Mine's Graham." "You don't look like a Graham," she replied, tilting her head with quiet suspicion. He almost laughed, though his chest ached too much for humor. "What do I look like then?" "Like someone who doesn't belong in an alley," she said simply. The truth in her words stung. He nodded slowly. "You don't belong here either." Her gaze dropped to her shoes, if they could be called that. One was taped together with strips of duct tape, the other barely clung to her foot. His throat tightened. Before he could speak again, she whispered, "My mom said not to talk to strange men." "She's right," he admitted. "That's smart." Maddie's eyes lifted again, searching his face. "But you don't seem mean. You look lonely." The words landed heavier than he could bear. Lonely. The one truth he had tried to mask with work, with control, with endless routines. Somehow, this child saw it instantly. He asked about her mother carefully, not wanting to push too hard. Maddie finally pointed down a shadowed passage and said, "She's sick, behind the brick building. She doesn't wake up sometimes." Graham's heart clenched. Fear pressed into him, cold and urgent. He followed Maddie deeper into the alley until they reached a space hidden by pallets and a worn tarp. Inside was little more than a corner of concrete, damp blankets scattered on the ground, and in the center, a woman.
What?
Her skin was pale, her breath shallow, her body frighteningly frail. "This is your mom?" he asked quietly. Maddie nodded, brushing a damp curl away from her mother's forehead. "She's been really tired," she whispered. "She told me not to be scared, told me I was being brave." Graham knelt beside the woman Isabel. He would later learn checking for a pulse. It was weak, but there. Relief flickered, quickly drowned by urgency.
I admit that
They had nothing
when
here.
things get too
No
quiet,
food, no clean
actually
water,
scares
no
me.
warmth. He didn't know how they had survived this long. Maddie pulled something from a crumpled bag and offered it to him. A piece of stale bread, edges torn away. "It's old, but the middle's okay," she said earnestly. "You can have it." His throat tightened so hard he could barely breathe. In all his years of wealth, no one had given him something so simple, so sincere. He took it gently, whispering, "Thank you." Then, he reached for his phone. With firm precision, he called 911. His voice was steady, but his insides churned as he gave the dispatcher the location and described Isabel's condition. Maddie's grip on her bear tightened. She didn't argue, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, testing him, waiting to see if he would vanish like so many before. When the ambulance arrived, the alley filled with flashing lights and hurried voices. The paramedics moved quickly, loading Isabel onto a stretcher. They asked Graham questions, assuming he was family. He didn't correct them. He just stayed. As they wheeled her toward the exit, Maddie tugged his sleeve. "She doesn't wake up when I talk to her. Maybe you try." The plea pierced him. He stepped beside the stretcher, gently taking Isabel's hand. "Your daughter's been so brave," he said softly. "She brought me here. You're not alone anymore." Her eyelids fluttered weakly. It was barely a movement, but Graham caught it. Maddie's small shoulders eased, hope flickering in her weary eyes. In the ambulance, Maddie sat across from him, clutching her bear like a lifeline. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything: fear, exhaustion, and a sliver of trust. Graham kept his gaze steady on her, and on Isabel, silently vowing not to leave. At the hospital, doctors and nurses rushed Isabel into intensive care. Questions came fast: insurance, history, emergency contact. Graham stepped in, his voice low but commanding. "She gets full care, private room, round-the-clock monitoring." When administrators hesitated, he made it clear. Cost was no obstacle.
Where is
He would
Maddie?
sign whatever was needed. Within minutes, Isabel was admitted. For once, Graham's wealth and influence didn't feel
Maddie's
like
safe.
tools of status. They
She's
felt
at
like
my
weapons against despair. Later, in the quiet of the waiting area, Maddie stood beside him, small and silent. Finally, she whispered, "Where do I go
Maddie
now?"
draws these little drawings
Without
for me.
thinking, Graham answered,
And then
"With
we
me,
have
just
Coco.
for now, until your mom wakes up." Her wide eyes studied
Howard
him
the bear.
carefully. Then she nodded once. "Okay, but only if I can bring Bear." That night, Graham carried Maddie into his penthouse. The glittering skyline sparkled outside the windows, but she barely looked. Clutching her bear, she stood frozen in the entryway, overwhelmed by the sheer space. "This is your house?" she asked softly. "It's home," he said. She didn't move, only held the bear
I
tighter.
just cannot believe
Graham
this.
knelt, offering a small smile.
know.
"No rules here. You can take off your shoes if you want." After a long pause, she slipped out of her tattered sneakers and followed him down the hall. He showed her the guest room, sheets crisp and untouched. She sat on the
Later,
bed but didn't lie
Isabel
down.
slowly walks out of the
"I'm not
hospital.
sleepy," she whispered. "I know," he replied gently. "But you can rest."
Howard
He
and
brought her
Isabel.
water, made sure she was comfortable, and before
Thanks,
leaving,
Graham.
Of course,
he
Isabel.
hesitated. "Would you like a story?" Maddie blinked in surprise, then gave the faintest nod. So he told her about a lighthouse keeper who stayed awake through the storm, keeping the light burning so ships could find their way. Maddie listened, quiet but alert, her body inching toward the pillows. When he finished, she asked in a whisper,
Really happy.
Do
"Do people like you
Yes, she
ever
is.
stay?" His chest
You will
tightened.
never be alone.
He swallowed hard, then answered, "I'm still here, aren't I?" She didn't reply, but her eyes stayed on him until they finally closed. Graham sat in the chair beside her, watching her breathe, realizing he had just made a promise bigger than words. The days that followed were unlike anything Graham had experienced in years. His penthouse, once sterile and silent, now carried faint sounds of life. A child's humming, the scratch of crayons on paper, the soft shuffle of small feet across marble floors. Maddie had begun to leave drawings in unexpected places. A lighthouse in purple crayon, a stick figure family. Beneath a sun, the word home scrawled with wobbly determination. Each drawing felt like a quiet declaration. a fragile bridge connecting their fractured worlds. 3 days after Maddie first stayed with him, Graham received a call from the hospital. Isabel was awake. He went at once, leaving a note for Maddie promising pancakes when he returned. When he stepped into Isabel's room, she looked weak but alive, her eyes alert, though clouded with confusion. She whispered, "Where's Maddie?" "She's safe," Graham assured her. "She's been staying with me." Her hand trembled as it clutched the blanket. "She trusts you, and I trust her," he said softly. Isabel's tears welled up as she confessed she hadn't known how to protect her daughter anymore. Graham shared a piece of his own truth, the loss of Claire and Ella, the hollow years since. He told her how Maddie's quiet strength had stirred something inside him he thought was gone. Isabel listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, Graham felt the weight of his grief shift, not erased, but transformed by connection. When Maddie reunited with her mother days later, the hospital room filled with sobs and laughter. Isabel clutched her daughter tightly, whispering apologies and love. Maddie proudly told her mother. He stayed. Isabel turned to Graham with eyes full of gratitude and disbelief. "You really stayed?" she asked.
And that's why I think it's
He answered simply, "I said I would." After Isabel was discharged, weak but recovering, Graham brought them both to his home. At first, Isabel resisted, insisting she didn't want to intrude. But when Maddie clung to her hand, looking up at Graham with trust, the decision became inevitable. They were no longer strangers linked by chance, they were becoming something resembling a family. Life in the penthouse shifted in subtle ways. Isabel moved gently through the space, still regaining strength. Maddie danced, barefoot in her new room, decorated with unicorn sheets, star-shaped lights, and a rainbow nightlight. She built forts out of couch cushions, filled the walls with laughter, and once asked with heartbreaking seriousness, "What if I call you Daddy one day? Will you still be here the next?" Graham knelt to meet her eyes. "I will always be here the next day," he promised. "Even if I'm tired, even if I mess up, you won't ever be alone again." She studied him carefully, then whispered, "Promise?" His answer was steady. "Promise." Meanwhile, Isabel found her footing again. Graham offered her a chance to manage a small cafe in the lobby of one of his hotels. It was modest work, but it gave her dignity and purpose. She wore an apron Maddie had decorated with fabric markers and greeted customers with a smile. Each time Graham stopped by, ordering coffee and a cookie Maddie had helped bake, he felt a quiet sense of belonging grow stronger. One afternoon, Maddie returned from school glowing with excitement. "I have a best friend now," she announced proudly. "Her name's Laya. She says my sandwich is fancy." Graham chuckled, marveling at the ordinary joy of her words. For a girl who once lived in a damp alley, friendship at school was a victory as meaningful as any corporate milestone. That evening, he noticed a new wooden sign on the gate of his home, painted in bright strokes. The letters wobbled, but the message was clear. The Mitchell family, where love lives. Graham touched the sticky paint, his chest tightening. This was no longer just his house. It was becoming a home. One night, under strings of fairy lights in the garden, they shared grilled cheese sandwiches, carrot sticks, and a crooked chocolate cake Maddie insisted she had baked. She sat on Graham's lap, her head resting against his chest, and whispered, "You know what I remember most about the box? People walked by, but none of them ever stopped long enough for me to hear them breathe. But I heard you breathe. You stopped." Graham's eyes burned. He held her close and said, "That's because I was finally ready to live again." Beside them, Isabel watched with quiet gratitude, her eyes shimmering. For Graham, the truth was undeniable. Maddie and Isabel hadn't just filled the emptiness left by Claire and Ella. They had grown something new, messy, fragile, but alive. Seattle skies remained gray, drizzle constant, but in Graham's world, everything had shifted. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about showing up, about staying, about choosing to love even when it hurt. For the first time in years, he no longer feared tomorrow. Because tomorrow, he knew, he wouldn't be facing it alone. Sometimes, the most extraordinary transformations begin in the most unexpected places. A cardboard box, in a dark alley, a child's weary voice, a man's broken heart. Graham Mitchell had everything that money could buy, yet nothing that truly mattered. His nights were empty, his penthouse silent, his soul weighed down by loss. But then came Maddie, a little girl who refused to disappear, and Isabel, a mother clinging to life. In choosing to stop, to see, and to stay, Graham discovered something he thought he had buried forever: the power of love to heal. This is not just a story about a CEO rescuing a child. It is about a child rescuing a man. It is about how one act of kindness can ripple outward, turning despair into hope, silence into laughter, and strangers into family. Maddie's box was not just a shelter, it was a test of humanity, and Graham chose to answer it with compassion. Life did not magically become easy. The scars of loss remained, the challenges of rebuilding were real. But in the laughter of a child, drawing lighthouses, in the fragile strength of a mother finding her way again, in the quiet promise of a man who finally stayed, something unshakable was born. A home, a family, a new legacy built not on wealth or status, but on the courage to love again. And maybe that is what we all need to remember. Sometimes the most important difference we can make in the world is simply to stop, to see someone who feels invisible, and to choose not to walk away. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on your own life. When was the last time you chose to stay when it would have been easier to turn away? What small act of kindness changed everything for you? Share it, because your story might be the light someone else is searching for in their darkest moment. And if you want to continue walking with us through stories that inspire, that break and rebuild the heart, that remind us of what it means to be human, subscribe to the Retold Stories. Because the world is full of voices like Maddie's, waiting to be heard, and choices like Graham's, waiting to be made. Together, we can keep the light burning.